Bigger worms, richer soil, and the rice secret that gardeners simply cannot ignore. Hello, friends, and welcome. If you have ever stood in your garden or next to your favorite indoor plant and wondered why your soil feels tired, compact, or completely lifeless, you are certainly not alone. So many of us, busy parents tending to small back gardens, young professionals squeezing pots onto sunny flat windowsills, retirees finding joy in raised beds, or weekend gardeners experimenting with houseplants, share the exact same dream. We want soil that feels alive, vibrant, and generous enough to bring out the absolute best in every plant we care for. And here is the truth I have learned after years of nurturing both indoor greenery and outdoor gardens. Healthy soil isn't built on expensive fertilizers or complicated tools. It is built on a partnership with nature. Today, we are going to explore an idea so simple and so accessible that it might actually surprise you. It begins not in the garden center, but right in your own kitchen. Yes, tucked inside your pantry is a humble grain that can transform your soil and attract the secret workers who make gardens thrive. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you will see that this overlooked ingredient has the power to change the way you think about soil forever. And before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button to join our community, where soil meets soul and every gardener finds inspiration. Let's pause for a moment and shine a light on some of the smallest yet most powerful allies you could ever have in your garden: the earthworms. Think of them as quiet architects, always working beneath the surface, carving tunnels that allow water to flow, roots to breathe, and nutrients to move freely. They are like tireless caretakers transforming ordinary soil into something rich, airy, and fertile. For those of you who struggle with compacted ground in your back garden or wonder why your potted plants never quite thrive, worms may be the missing workforce you didn't even know you needed. When earthworms eat decomposing matter, they grind it through their muscular gizzards and leave behind castings, tiny nuggets of pure plant gold packed with nutrients. These castings improve the soil structure, giving it that crumbly texture gardeners dream about. And here is something fascinating. Studies show that worm activity can boost plant growth and yields by as much as 25%. That means greener leaves, stronger roots, and healthier blooms. So as you picture your own garden, whether it's a few pots on a balcony, a collection of indoor plants, or a thriving outdoor bed, imagine it alive with this invisible workforce, steadily improving your soil day and night. And in just a moment, we will talk about the unexpected everyday ingredient that can help these little architects multiply and thrive even more. For many of us, compost feels like the ultimate answer to every garden problem. You pile up kitchen scraps, add some leaves, maybe even a little manure, and you expect the soil to come alive. And while compost is truly wonderful, I have learned over the years that it doesn't always tell the whole story. Healthy soil isn't just about adding organic matter, it's about creating a living ecosystem where worms, microbes, and roots all play their parts. Imagine feeding a family only one type of food. Yes, they will survive, but will they thrive? The same goes for your garden. Compost offers a steady foundation, but worms, the ones who quietly aerate and fertilize, sometimes need a boost of quick, easily digestible energy to keep multiplying, and that's where so many gardeners get stuck. You may notice your compost looks great, yet your soil still feels heavy, or your plants don't respond as you had hoped. It is because worms need more than slow, fibrous materials. They need sparks of energy that encourage them to grow bigger, reproduce faster, and stay active right where you need them most. In a moment, I will share how a simple store cupboard staple can provide that missing spark, turning your soil into a buffet of life and helping worms work harder than ever before. Now let's open the pantry door and talk about rice. This is the grain that so many of us cook almost every day, yet rarely think about beyond the dinner table. What if I told you this humble staple has the power to flip the switch in your soil, to wake up life beneath the surface and set off a chain reaction that worms cannot resist? It all begins with the tiniest of garden players, the microbes. When rice is added to the soil, whether cooked, crushed, or even just rinsed in water, it releases starches that quickly break down into simple sugars. These sugars act like a feast for microbes who suddenly find themselves in an all-you-can-eat buffet. They multiply, spread, and create a buzz of activity that is invisible to our eyes but felt deeply by the soil. And here is where it gets magical. Worms are drawn not so much to the rice itself, but to the microbial party that rice sparks. The more microbes thrive, the more worms gather, feeding eagerly on the activity around them. Think of rice as the yeast in bread making. Just a pinch of yeast transforms flour into a loaf full of life and structure. In the same way, a small handful of rice can ignite an underground celebration where microbes dance, worms feast, and soil turns into something soft, rich, and nourishing. This isn't gardening with chemicals or shortcuts. It is nature responding to a simple invitation. And soon we will explore exactly how to use rice in different forms to bring this hidden banquet to life in your own garden. Picture this. You have just finished dinner and there is a small bowl of plain rice left on the table. Most of us scrape it into the bin or rinse it down the sink without a second thought. But in the garden, that same handful of cooked rice can become a beacon for life. When you spread a thin layer of it across your soil and gently tuck it under mulch or compost, something remarkable begins almost immediately. The softened grains break down fast, feeding microbes within hours. And by the next day, the soil feels more alive. I remember the first time I tried this. I pushed aside the mulch in one corner of my raised bed and slipped in just a spoonful of leftover rice. A week later, when I returned to check, the soil was wriggling with movement. Dozens of earthworms had gathered, plumper and livelier than I had seen in months. It was as if the soil had thrown a party and every worm in the neighborhood had shown up. For those of you with compact soil and back garden beds or tired potted plants that never seem to perk up, this little trick can be a turning point. The beauty lies in its simplicity. No fancy products, no expensive solutions, just yesterday's rice breathing fresh energy into your garden. And while cooked rice brings quick results, it is only one of the many forms we can use to keep the underground feast alive. Next, we will look at how uncooked rice works differently. Slower, steadier, but just as powerful for your soil. If cooked rice is the quick spark that sets the soil buzzing with life, then raw rice is the slow-burning candle that keeps the glow alive. Unlike its softer cousin, uncooked grains take their time to break down. And that is exactly what makes them so valuable in the long run. When you crush or slightly grind raw rice and bury it 2 or 3 inches beneath the soil, you are setting the stage for a steady release of nutrients that can sustain microbial life for weeks rather than days. Think of it as planting tiny time capsules of energy. You may not notice dramatic changes overnight, but beneath the surface, the microbes are working quietly and steadily, breaking down those starches and creating a buffet that worms will eventually sniff out. For gardeners with raised beds or heavier clay soils, this approach works especially well because it ensures the soil doesn't just get a quick fix, but a lasting improvement in texture and vitality. I have seen this trick turn neglected corners of a garden into thriving patches months later. Where once the soil was stubborn and compact, it became loose and rich, almost crumbling in my hands. For balcony growers or anyone who doesn't have time to constantly feed their soil, uncooked rice offers a low-maintenance way to keep the underground community alive and thriving. And as we move forward, you will see there is yet another form of rice, one that flows like water and can bring your soil an instant drink of life. Now let's move from solid grains to something many of us pour away without thinking: the cloudy water left after rinsing rice. That simple liquid, often discarded down the sink, is actually packed with starches and trace minerals that your soil and plants crave. When you pour rice water directly onto your garden beds or into pots, you are offering a gentle drink that instantly nourishes microbes, moistens the soil, and invites worms to linger. It is quick, easy, and completely free. But here is where the story gets even more fascinating. In many traditional Asian gardening practices, rice water isn't just used fresh, it is allowed to ferment. After sitting for a few days, it develops beneficial bacteria, turning into a kind of probiotic tonic for the soil. Just like fermented foods can improve our own digestion, fermented rice water supercharges microbial diversity underground. When I first experimented with it, I noticed not just more worm activity, but healthier roots and leaves that seemed to glow with vigor. For houseplant lovers, this is a secret worth noting. A diluted splash of rice water on your indoor plants can refresh tired soil without the risk of overfeeding. And in outdoor gardens, it becomes an easy routine. Save the rinse water, give it to the soil, and let nature do the rest. With such a simple habit, every pot and bed in your care can begin to feel more alive. And if you are already amazed by what rice water can do, wait until you see how rice transforms a worm bin into a thriving powerhouse. For those of you who keep a worm bin, you already know how exciting it is to watch scraps transform into rich, dark castings. But if you have ever noticed your worms slowing down or your bin feeling sluggish, rice can be the little boost that wakes everything up again. When added in small amounts, cooked or soaked, it becomes like a gourmet treat for your worms. The softened grains break down quickly, the microbes multiply, and suddenly the worms are more active, wriggling with energy and reproducing faster. I like to think of it as serving dessert at the end of a meal. Your worms happily work through shredded leaves, cardboard, or vegetable scraps. But when rice is mixed in, it feels like a special occasion. They gather, feed eagerly, and leave behind castings that are richer and more abundant. The trick, of course, is moderation. Too much rice in one spot can sour the bin, creating smells you don't want. But when balanced with browns like paper or dry leaves, it blends perfectly, giving your worms variety and energy. What is even more encouraging is how quickly you can see the results. Within days of adding a handful of softened rice, the texture of the castings becomes finer, almost silky, and the worms themselves look plumper. For indoor gardeners keeping bins under the sink or outdoor growers with larger setups, this little adjustment makes the difference between a bin that simply survives and one that thrives. And once you see how worms respond in such a contained environment, you will understand why rice can be just as powerful when added directly into your soil beds. As exciting as it is to learn that rice can energize your soil and your worms, there is one truth every gardener needs to remember. Too much of a good thing can backfire. I have met gardeners who, after seeing the first signs of success, rushed to dump bowls of leftover rice straight into their beds. Within days, the soil smelled sour, fruit flies gathered, and the magic was lost. Rice is powerful, but it is meant to be a supplement, not the main course. The first mistake is quantity. A light sprinkle or a handful mixed into compost is enough. The second mistake is forgetting to cover it. Exposed rice not only smells unpleasant as it ferments, but it can also attract pests you don't want in your garden. Always tuck it under soil or mulch so it can decompose quietly. And here is another common misstep: using seasoned or oily rice. Butter, salt, sauces, or cooking oils can harm the delicate balance of microbes and worms. So only plain rice belongs in your garden. Think of rice as a gentle nudge to nature, not a shove. When applied with care, it accelerates the natural processes that are already at work beneath the surface. But if you overwhelm the soil with it, you risk tipping that balance in the wrong direction. The goal isn't to smother the earth with rice, but to give just enough to wake it up, to keep worms thriving, and to build soil that steadily improves over time. And when you strike that balance, the results are nothing short of extraordinary. When you start using rice the right way, the changes don't just stay hidden underground. They begin to show in every corner of your garden. At first, you will notice the worms. They will appear in greater numbers, looking thicker, more energetic, and multiplying faster than before. With them comes an explosion of castings, those tiny dark pellets that enrich your soil with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Each handful of soil begins to feel lighter, looser, and almost crumbly in your hands instead of heavy and compact. Soon the plants respond. Roots push deeper with ease. Leaves grow greener and stems stand taller, as if fueled by an invisible energy. Houseplant lovers often tell me their indoor pots stop feeling sluggish. Suddenly the soil breathes again, draining well yet holding moisture just enough to keep plants happy. Outdoor gardeners notice vegetables filling out more fully, flowers blooming brighter, and even stressed plants recovering with new strength. But the benefits don't stop there. Rice-fed soil hosts a wider community of microbes, which means your compost breaks down faster and your garden builds resilience against disease. It is as though every spoonful of rice creates ripples, first feeding the smallest microbes, then the worms, and finally the plants themselves. And for you, the gardener, the joy of watching tired soil come alive is the greatest reward. Each change is proof that a simple act repeated with care can create a thriving ecosystem right at your fingertips. One of the most beautiful things about this rice secret is how flexible it can be. But the way you use it depends on where you garden and what kind of space you have. In warmer climates where heat speeds up decomposition, rice breaks down almost too quickly. Here the trick is to use smaller amounts more often, tiny sprinkles that keep the soil active without overwhelming it. In cooler regions where decomposition slows, burying rice a little deeper protects it from freezing and allows the microbes to keep working steadily beneath the surface, even when the air feels cold. And what about those of you who don't have a back garden at all? Maybe you are tending herbs on a balcony or nurturing a collection of indoor plants by the window. Rice water becomes your best friend here. A diluted splash every couple of weeks refreshes potting compost, gently feeding microbes and keeping roots lively without creating pests or smells indoors. I have even seen flat gardeners turn struggling potted figs and monsteras into thriving green giants with nothing more than this routine. The point is, rice isn't reserved for large gardens or perfect conditions. It adapts. Whether you are growing tomatoes under the sun, orchids on a kitchen shelf, or lettuce in raised beds, rice can be folded into your care routine. It is like a language nature speaks everywhere, simple, universal, and easy to understand once you begin. And when combined with other household scraps, this humble grain becomes part of an even richer story of soil transformation. Rice on its own is powerful, but when you start blending it with other everyday scraps, the results can be even more remarkable. Think of your soil as a living community, one that thrives on diversity. Just as our own diets need variety, the underground ecosystem craves different textures and nutrients. That is where your kitchen becomes a treasure chest. Coffee grounds, for example, pair beautifully with rice. While rice delivers starch and quick energy, coffee grounds add nitrogen and a gritty texture that worms love to move through. Banana skins, on the other hand, provide potassium and sweetness, balancing the meal with nutrients that feed flowering plants. And let's not forget eggshells. When crushed finely and added with rice, they bring calcium into the mix, strengthening plant cell walls and preventing common problems like blossom end rot in tomatoes. Together, these simple scraps create what I like to call a soil buffet, where every bite offers something different for microbes and worms. I have seen gardeners who once threw all these items away begin saving them in a small bucket by the sink, and within weeks their compost piles and garden beds were transformed into hubs of activity. This practice doesn't just improve soil, it changes the way you look at waste. Suddenly, the leftovers on your plate or the rinse water in your sink aren't rubbish, but gifts to the earth. And when you start combining them thoughtfully, the cycle of giving back to the soil becomes second nature. From here, it is only a short step to seeing rice not just as food for your garden, but as a symbol of something bigger. When you step back and look at the journey of rice in the garden, it becomes clear that this isn't just about feeding worms or enriching soil. It is about shifting the way we think. For so long, many of us believed gardening meant buying bags of fertilizer, expensive soil mixes, or fancy tools. But the truth is, the most powerful changes often come from the simplest everyday things we already have at home. A spoonful of rice, a peel from a banana, a splash of rinse water. These scraps remind us that gardening is less about consuming and more about partnering with nature. I have always loved the moment when a gardener realizes that what they once called waste is actually the key to growth. Rice is a perfect symbol of that. It bridges the gap between the kitchen and the soil, between our daily lives and the hidden underground world we rely on. And it tells us something profound. The health of our gardens doesn't need to come from outside. It can be built from within, from what we already have in our hands. So whether you are a beginner tending your very first houseplant or a seasoned grower managing rows of vegetables, rice invites you to see your soil differently. It is a reminder that small acts add up, that every grain matters, and that nature rewards those who give back. And with that mindset, you are ready to see your garden not just as a space to grow plants, but as a living ecosystem where nothing is wasted and everything has purpose. Every grain has a story. And so we arrive at the heart of this journey, the realization that something as ordinary as rice can hold extraordinary power for our gardens. From cooked grains that spark instant life, to raw rice that slowly nourishes, to cloudy rinse water that refreshes the soil, each form becomes a thread in the tapestry of healthy living earth. Along the way, worms thrive, microbes multiply, and plants stand taller, greener, and stronger. What once seemed like waste becomes wonder, proof that abundance often hides in the simplest places. As you look at your own garden, whether it's a single pot of herbs on the balcony, a collection of thriving indoor plants, or rows of vegetables under the open sky, I encourage you to experiment. Save a handful of rice, pour out the rinse water, tuck it gently under mulch, and watch. Watch how the soil changes, how the worms respond, and how your plants return the favor in blooms, leaves, and harvests. Now, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever tried feeding rice to your soil? What transformations did you notice? Share your experiences in the comments below. I read everyone and love learning from this community. Together, we will keep uncovering secrets that turn ordinary gardens into extraordinary sanctuaries, where soil truly meets soul. If this story changed the way you look at the humble grains in your pantry, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the natural wisdom that has been buried for far too long. Let's cultivate a greener future together. The next garden treasure will be revealed very soon.